July 15th, 5:31 p.m. And the first agenda topic is the approval of the minutes from last week. Any corrections, additions, or motions?
I'll move approval of the minutes as written.
Motion to approve the minutes as written. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is that Ben? Ben seconds?
That's right.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes as written passes. The next agenda item is our presentation by our guest speaker, and that's Alex, right?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm just going to pull up my presentation and turn off my camera. Okay. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome, great. Okay, so like I said, I'm Alex DeSena. I'm the regional housing planner helping to implement Dane County's regional housing strategy. Today, I'll be giving you a brief overview of the regional housing strategy and the RHS Strategic Action Plan, which is a 5-year action plan to solve Dane County's housing crisis. Then I'll be reviewing presentations that were given last month by staff from 4 municipalities in the county that have already begun utilizing TID extension funds. Each of these communities' initiatives reflect at least one of the RHS's recommended priorities and strategies. So the RHS purpose is to work together as a region to identify a shared vision and key housing priorities and strategies we can work on and work towards together to address the housing crisis in Dane County. The RHS was a year-long strategic planning process involving an 80-member housing advisory committee that met monthly to create the strategic action plan. The plan recommends top 5 housing priorities to work toward for the next 5 years. It included 26 sponsors, like I said, over 80 Housing Advisory Committee members, 17 cities, towns, and villages, including 4 mayors, city council and village board members from a number of municipalities, and 2 state representatives. In the first Housing Advisory Committee meeting, the participants were asked to identify major areas of concern for their community, organization, and business. These areas of concern included increasing the number of affordable and workforce units, increasing the overall number of housing units, increasing housing near jobs and transit, and providing more pathways to home ownership. They then identified their top priorities to address for the region as a whole. Reducing racial disparities in housing and homeownership is a particularly high priority, followed by building capacity to address housing needs, building relationships to enhance partnerships and collaboration, and learning about housing issues, tools, and strategies. So during the year-long strategic planning process, the Housing Advisory Committee, or HAC, identified their core values and a vision statement as a guide to determine their top housing priorities. The top housing priorities also have associated strategies and action items that go along with them. So the core values: accountability. All entities, public, private, and nonprofit alike, accept and share responsibility for providing attainable housing. Affordability. All people have housing they can afford. Economic growth. Housing production keeps pace with employer growth and meets employee needs. Empowerment. Residents, practitioners, and elected officials have a shared understanding of housing needs and are equipped to leverage housing resources and programs. Equity. Historically excluded populations and lower income households have access to quality housing. And lastly, sustainable development. Housing is located near existing services, infrastructure, transit, amenities, and jobs, reducing environmental impacts and improving quality of life for all residents. And the vision statement that they decided on is the RHS envisions an equitable and environmentally sustainable future where all residents have access to quality and affordable housing in connected neighborhoods. So, what are the 5 top housing priorities that they came up with? 1, increase the number of housing units attainable to low and moderate income households. Increase the overall number of housing units. Provide housing, resources, and protections for the most vulnerable populations. Rehabilitate and preserve affordability of existing housing. And provide more pathways to home ownership. Here's an outline of the RHS Strategic Action Plan's housing priorities and strategies. Each strategy also has associated action items with over 100 action items in the Strategic Action Plan. Each priority also identifies implementation partners and metrics. So, to start with municipalities, the Village of Oregon presented on their use of TID extension funds to provide gap financing for new housing developments, as well as for rehabilitation to help preserve their older housing stock. They provided $168,000 in matching funds with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago for preservation and renovation of 40 older apartment units that are for extremely low-income seniors and residents with disabilities. They also dedicated $180,000 to developing 8 new Habitat for Humanity owner-occupied units. They still have $150,000 left to allocate to future projects. So going back to the strategic action plan, these programs align with 2 of our action steps here: increasing private sector, municipal, county, and state funding for affordable housing, including grants beyond what currently exists, and contributing toward building 250 affordable single-family for sale homes. They also aligned their program with increasing flexible funding and access to funding for Habitat for Humanity and similar entities to create new permanent affordable housing. Moving on to Waunakee, the Village of Waunakee implemented a home rehab program called the Waunakee Housing Betterment Fund. Here's a snapshot of the TID extension funds being used for the program, as well as projected funds from future closures. They chose to provide non-repayable grants to applicants for home repairs. A few examples of these repairs include window replacement for older housing stock, siding repair, and roofing repair. For their first round of funding, they received 6 applications and were able to serve all 6, allocating almost $34,000 of TID extension funds. So Waunakee aligned their program with the action step of identifying funding sources, grants and loans, and expanding existing programs for homeowner renovations, energy efficiency upgrades, and remediation. And it contributes to ensuring access to people of color and underrepresented groups. In addition, following along with sustainable development, they helped fund additional energy efficiency grants for multifamily properties and for income qualified homeowners that ensure affordability. The City of Sun Prairie presented their 3 initiatives that they have implemented with TID extension funds. Sun Prairie allocated their TID extension funds into their municipality's Affordable Housing Fund, which is driven by these housing goals: to add and preserve affordable housing units, expand housing choice, increase housing stability, improve the quality, accessibility, and attainability of housing. The 3 funded projects include a satellite tenant resource center office, administration of an anti-retaliation program, and a new full-time housing and equitable development planner salary. So they funded a satellite tenant resource center office in Sun Prairie specifically to provide housing counseling, mediation, eviction defense and protection, and a community outreach and education. The goal was to address the need for bilingual renter and landlord support and support for those facing evictions. While the total cost of the program was $75,000 for the annual contract, Sun Prairie actually split the cost with Dane County 50-50, allowing them to further leverage their TID extension funds. Just in the first 3 months of the program, the impact includes 112 calls to the Sun Prairie specific phone line and 15 drop-in visits at the office. They also adopted a retaliation ordinance in 2023 and allocated funds toward administration and enforcement of the ordinance. They contracted with the Madison Department of Civil Rights to provide mediation, investigation, and conciliation between renters and landlords for retaliation cases. The goal of this program is to protect tenants who complain about a building code violation and later receive some form of a retaliation by their housing provider, such as an eviction notice. This program specifically responds to the needs of lower income residents and people of color, which are top priorities for the regional housing strategy. And Sun Prairie's TID extension funds also helps to fund a full-time, oh, my computer just, uh-oh. Am I still there?
Yeah, we can still see your slides and hear you.
Okay, great. My screen went black for a minute there. Anyway, they also helped fund a full-time housing and equitable development planner position to dedicate time to housing work. This housing snapshot on the right, oh, here we go. Sorry, there we go. This housing snapshot shows the impact this position has had thus far. So lots of actions that have been taken by the staff person. So for Sun Prairie, their programs also aligned with a number of action steps in the RHS. These include increasing funding to expand nonprofit and municipal staff capacity for renter assistance, as well as for programs that support existing renters at risk of displacement and provide case management services. Also, identify dedicated staff to connect renters with programs or resources such as Tenant Resource Center. And then lastly, identify or draft sample ordinances that jurisdictions can adopt on rent abatement or anti-retaliation. The City of Madison also presented on their use of TID extension funds, providing gap financing for new affordable housing development. So Madison also allocates their TIF extension funds into their larger affordable housing fund. They prioritize creating units with 60% AMI limit for rentals and 80% AMI limit for home ownership. They loan gap financing to projects with a 30-year mortgage term. The Affordable Housing Fund is allocated into 3 different buckets: homeownership development, tax credit development, and non-tax credit development. Their homeownership development prioritizes projects with permanent affordability or equity appreciation, in addition to co-housing, lease to purchase, and other homeownership initiatives such as homebuyer education. The largest barrier is the rather high subsidy required per unit needed to make it affordable for income qualified buyers, but the largest benefit is the ability to expand affordability to households as low as 30% AMI by stacking multiple programs. And then their non-tax credit developments funded include cooperatives, nonprofit as well as for-profit developers, and missing middle style developments. The largest barrier for this program is also the high subsidy required per unit needed to make it affordable. And the largest benefit is its ability to fund non-traditional development types that are otherwise priced out of the market. Their tax credit developments include a number of additional priorities as well as scoring criteria, including an emphasis on 30% AMI units, which is the most in-demand unit type in the county, as well as tenant selection plan standards, energy efficiency requirements, etc. Within the tax credit developments alone, 33 projects have been awarded, creating a total of 2,788 new units, with most of these being affordable at the 60% AMI limit. 469 of these units were affordable at the 30% AMI limit, and 641 units received supportive services. So Madison's programs align with a number of the action steps that we've already discussed. So I'll just be highlighting one new one. That's to increase flexible funding to access to funding for Habitat for Humanity, etc., to create new permanent affordable housing. So overall, municipal use of TIF extension funds in Dane County involves a number of different options and programming depending on the needs of your own community. These include new affordable housing development, including multifamily and single family, preservation and rehab of older housing stock, energy efficiency upgrades, tenant support services and resources, anti-retaliation ordinance administration, and then a full-time housing and equitable development planner position. If you would like to learn more about the RHS, please visit our website. It's on the screen here, rhs.danecounty.gov. And if you're interested in learning more about any of these 4 programs that I discussed today, the current programming page on our website has the recorded presentations as well as the full slide decks that you can view and reference. And that's all I have for you. I will go ahead and turn my camera back on, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
I'll open
you.
up for questions from the group. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Sure, thanks, Alex. Great presentation. Really appreciate that. The there's a couple distinctions in a couple of cities there, like Oregon and Madison seem to focus a bit more on create addressing the current gap, right? Whereas Wanakee and to some degree Sun Prairie focus more about kind of avoiding the gap getting worse, right? With some of the rehabilitation and whatnot. What do you think led kind of Wanakee and Sun Prairie kind of more in that direction?
That's a great question. I think that's something they would both be able to speak to better about their own individual communities, but I imagine there were things they were hearing from residents. I know for Sun Prairie, I was actually an intern around the time they were adopting the anti-retaliation ordinance, and this was a concern that they were hearing actually from their housing case manager at Sunshine Place. So that relationship, I think, played a lot into their decision. I can't speak as much to Wanakee, but I imagine they have an older housing stock, right? So there's more need for repair and rehab and those types of things. So really, you'll want to do your own kind of internal analysis within your municipality to assess the needs.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Alex, for the presentation. It was very good, and I had 2 questions. One, what does Dane County do with communities to help them with their kind of leverage their housing affordability initiatives?
In terms of Do you mean in terms of funding or just generally?
Well, let's talk about both, I guess, generally, and then with funding.
Yeah, so we just created this big strategic action plan. There's a lots to do in it, so we're chipping away at that. We'll be rolling out soon a technical assistance program to help communities update the housing chapter of their comprehensive plans. And actually, there's new WIDA loan funding that requires this update be done every 5 years in order to apply for these funds. And so this is something we're hoping to roll out as soon as possible to get those updated so communities can qualify for funds. Eventually, we'll have some sort of similar program to update zoning codes. In terms of funding, so for example, like the partnership with Dane County and Sun Prairie for the Tenant Resource Center satellite office, that was more of an organic development. I think that's something that, please stay in touch with us in our office at the county if you're interested in exploring that type of partnership, and we can try to make those connections as best we can and get you in the right room with the right people to have those conversations. Assuming the success of this program, I imagine there's going to be room for more in the future, but I can't promise anything, obviously. But something to explore. And
Sure,
then we'll
thanks.
have a number of other programs and resources coming out. I'm producing a number of fact sheets right now on different topics that are regionally relevant. So, zoning 101, affordable housing 101, missing middle housing, senior housing, just to provide some tools and entry level information on those topics to get people on the same page. But stay tuned for more.
Great,
I hope that was
fantastic.
helpful.
Yeah, no, it's quite helpful. This one follow-up question is if Middleton were to do, take one strategy or action, I guess, when what does the county see as being the most effective or the most getting the most bang from their buck?
That's a really good question. We as the county are taking a very regional approach to this. So our analysis has really um, these are regional issues that are being experienced everywhere in the county. And so I think a lot of that will come down to the specifics of your municipality and digging into that data. I know that generally, those priorities all emphasize equity and specifically addressing historical inequality for people of color and low income households. So some of those strategies that really hone into that as a goal um, that I mentioned during the presentation, like anti-retaliation, tenant resource center, the programs that serve the most vulnerable population. I also mentioned there's a severe shortage of 30% AMI units throughout the region. But again, these are regional issues, and we really encourage partnership with all the municipalities to help identify what the needs are locally and how we can support you in addressing those.
Just looking at some of the examples, and certainly City of Madison, they've used their affordable housing fund to leverage other resources through the Dane County and through WIDA that seem to get a lot of bang for the buck. And I just wanted to, kind of pick your brain on that, see what you thought about that.
Mm. Yeah. I know definitely for their home ownership programs, they do a lot. They try to make their application requirements, I think, align with other down payment assistance programs so that those can be stacked. So that's definitely something to consider. Like WIDA has a down payment assistance program that I'm relatively sure stacks with City of Madison's. And so looking into some of those and maybe aligning your programs with their requirements so that that could be an option. Um, that could be something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Crystal?
I just wanted to ask for like the tenant resource center, is there a way that like residents are being made aware of that resource? Is there a way that's like it's being like put out towards the people?
That's a really good question. Yes, and my understanding, so they housed the satellite office at Sunshine Place, which is essentially the catch-all social services organization serving Sun Prairie. So they have a number of services there. They have housing navigation, they have Centro Hispano, they have Joining Forces for Families, a food pantry. So it made sense to house it there. I think using the relationships that that organization already had in the community was really helpful in doing a lot of that outreach and getting the word out. But also, it's only been the first few months of the program, so I'm sure that's an ongoing effort in terms of, doing outreach and making sure residents are aware that that's a resource. Even just the Sun Prairie specific phone line, that's huge because you're going to get called back faster than if you call the city of Madison catch-all line. So yeah, promotion of that is essential, ongoing. Hmm.
Alex, you said that Stafford was co-located with what was that like a private org or a separate nonprofit org?
It's a nonprofit. Uh-huh. Yes, so they're on site there. And they're there 3 days a week, and 2 days a week in the Madison office.
My question was when do you expect those technical resource guides to be available to the community?
So, the technical assistance program, in which I'll be assisting communities with updating their housing chapter of their comprehensive plans, that will be launched next month, tentatively. So hopefully getting, really hitting the ground running by the fall, definitely. And fact sheets, those kinds of resources with technical information, things like that, we're drafting those right now. So hopefully those we'll start rolling those out gradually as we complete them. We're refining a couple right now, but if you're not already signed up for our newsletter, I would encourage you to sign up for that. We will definitely be sharing those updates there, and you can sign up for that on our website.
And then my last, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, you both excellent. So Alex, I think one of the items, can't remember, if it was a strategy or an action, but it mentioned 250, adding 250 units. Guessing that was in the region of that's new housing, right?
Mhm.
Was there, I maybe it's on there, but was there a time frame for that, and kind of how was the 250 identified?
That's a good question. Let me pull that up. Sorry, lots of slides here. Um, okay. Yeah. So I believe this plan is a 5-year plan to be implemented by 2028. So that would be the goal of 250 affordable single family for sale homes to be developed by 2028 within that 5-year period. The projections and the metrics were a pretty complex process. We contracted with Professor Kurt Paulson at the university, and he created a new formula that actually considers future trends. So, we're our growth rate is higher than what it's been in the past. So instead of using past projections, we're actually using those future projections to better analyze our numbers and some of this data. So I don't know specifically how the 250 for this action item came about. I could ask and get a little bit more information about that. But there was a pretty robust metrics projections process
Yeah, but
conducted.
Kurt was involved. It definitely was, right? We're confirming with that, right? So
Yeah.
and it's 250 annually, actually. Is that right then? Is that the target?
Oh yeah, yeah, you're correct. It says that right
Right.
there. Uh-huh. Thank you.
Okay.
My last question was about the metrics associated with each of the kind of action items and priorities. Does the um, do we have a dashboard, or do we have places that we're collecting those metrics and trending them over time for the 2024 to 2028 time period to see how we're doing?
Great question. So we will be doing annual updates on the metrics and publishing those for the community. So stay tuned for that. A dashboard's a great idea. I will ask about that. But yes, we will. There should be annual updates coming out. Mhm.
Yeah, I know as part of, the whole RHS process, Olivia sends out, Excel spreadsheets, and she kind of asks each community, every year, what are your goals? What are you going to be focusing on? And then I'm sure at the end of the year, she'll kind of ask us like, and check in and like, hey, did you accomplish any of these goals? Stuff like that. So she's already kind of gathering some of that kind of information. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and we will continue to do outreach with cities and villages and hear about their progress and Mhm.
Any other questions? Oh, Randy's back in. Questions. Oh, you're on mute, Randy.
Thanks. I saw one of your strategies for or action steps for municipalities was to advocate for expanding the TIF extension funds to 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
Are you seeing that happening yet? Is there any movement there?
Not that I'm aware of. Um, this is more state level advocacy, I believe. And yeah, I haven't heard any updated conversations about whether or not they're thinking about extending that. I think we're thinking about as the county, what is our role in some of that advocacy? So we're still kind of determining that, but hopefully we'll have an update for you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. Anything else? Well, I'll put my contact, if I can get there. Yeah, feel free to email me if you have any other questions come up. We're always happy to connect and help. And thank you so much for having us come talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks so much for coming, Alex. This is really helpful.
Bye.
Bye. All right, next up on our agenda is the city housing priorities, our Miro board, and I think opening up a discussion about what, you know, given the presentations that we've had the last couple of meetings and from the meeting today and reviewing the regional housing strategy, what is it that we want to do in Middleton here?
Yeah, so I've brought up the last version of the Miro board that we had looked at. I think it was maybe back in February or March. And so this was kind of like Alder Haniro had kind of brought it all together to a focus on these kind of 5 items. And then she did email me last week saying, she wouldn't be able to make it, but she wanted to include these 2 items for discussion tonight, just because, Alex had talked about, the rent abatement and the retaliation ordinance that Sun Prairie had worked on. And I think that was just something that was lacking in our previous conversations, as Alex said, focusing on the most vulnerable communities, the renter communities, and maybe like the 30% area median income. And so this was something that Alder Haniro wanted us to maybe discuss, and if we could, fit it into one of these, or, maybe add a 6th item to include that in there.
Daphne, can you help me out when you talk about the 5 items? Which 5 items are you talking about
Yeah,
again? Are you?
I'm talking about these middle 5. So, the first one is buy. So having, a fund to maybe purchase land, and then maybe, acquire it to be developed for affordable housing. The second one is build. So contracting with affordable housing developers. We've done this a couple times before. We, heard that presentation from the Mill Apartments next to the Metro Market and Century Avenue. Refurbish, we've also, talked about this before with our sustainability coordinator. She has that naturally occurring affordable housing program. And then the fourth one is educate. So, maybe creating another dashboard, as Alan mentioned, presentations to educate, how to buy housing and, maybe programs that are available for people buying. And then lastly, financing, so some kind of loan or gap financing for developers or homeowners. So those are the 5, I think, main focused things that we had talked about previously. And so then these bottom 2 are possible additions to that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
One of the, the previous workforce housing goals were quite specific in terms of they laid out, like numbers of units even and so on. Just, my thing, I like where we're at with the 5 topics, but I did appreciate the prior goals having some specificity. I can't even say that, specifics to it, that right. That set out some goals in terms of, hey, numbers of units. And I don't know if others feel the same way or whether that's just we need to take baby steps first. I don't know.
I agree with Randy there. I think it's helpful to narrow down on what our key, what's our key outcomes we're shooting for, right?
Yeah.
And kind of getting with, because within the 5 priorities, we probably need to prioritize, right, in some way, shape, or fashion, or possibly 6 if we consider a couple that at least added below as a 6th one, right? So I think helping us kind of figure out, where to start, because we like I mentioned the question, we've seen the different communities start different places based on where they thought their need was the biggest, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like Randy's suggestion is kind of that if those numbers are so applicable to pull those back in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think overall what these kind of 5 main priorities will do is, we're going to write another resolution, I think in 2025 or 2026 when, when the council starts kind of debating, to do that TID extension. And so these are kind of the categories where we would want to put, pots of money in. So, when a project does come forward and they say, we want to tap into those extension funds, can we get, some cut of that money, as long as if it fits into one of these kind of 5 or 6 categories, that's something that the city is then enabled to spend money on. But I think what the point you guys are making is, the data and, where we should prioritize. And so I think maybe adding, another sticky note that maybe says, having a housing needs assessment, because I think the last group, they were able to make those recommendations based off of the 2018 or 2019 housing needs assessment that Middleton did. And so maybe, one of the pots can be, having a housing need assessment done every, 3 or every 5 years, because I think it's just changed so drastically since 2019, the housing situation. So, maybe having, a pot of money just for, a housing needs assessment. And that way, we can assess our goals that way. I think could be, something of value.
That would seem to make a lot of sense. It'd really inform again, if there are priorities within the priorities, right? So that'd be a great first step.
I agree. I think there's going to be so much competition for the whatever money that's generated with the extension funds. There's going to be so much competition for it. We can't stretch the money far enough. So having some real priorities, I think, will help, guide the allocation of that money.
Wondering if the buy, build, and finance are all kind of additive or have a kind of natural synergy to them. And we've talked about in previous meetings how the expansion of the CDA's scope to maybe do more of what Madison does for organizing and coordinating developers for Middleton owned properties might be a way that we combine all three of those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that could go along with the idea of a land trust that we start in Middleton or use an existing land trust that operates in Dane County.
Mhm.
I think those three are kind of, to me, together, where the refurbished, I think more of the Energy Navigator projects. The education one is a little bit more fuzzy, but I think that's where we might put some of the considerations for an ordinance for the priority 3 down there, rent abatement and what was the other one? Rental retaliation.
Mhm.
Yeah. But that recommendation to the Common Council, I think, would fit those buy, build, and finance ones of we want to use that TIF money to acquire properties, to gap finance, to extend those loans,
Mhm.
whereas the refurbishment is more of a grant program for existing stock. And but to go back to what let's put numbers to the goal. I'm worried that we don't have like the infrastructure to build 200 units a year or something like that, at least in Middleton, right?
Well, I'm not sure we have the financial capability to do that.
Yeah.
But to me, I have always taken the approach that more more affordable housing is really the number one goal, because we don't have enough of it. We certainly don't have enough at that 30% level or the low 50% level, AMI levels. And so whatever we can do to increase the number of those units, I think, just gives more opportunity for people and helps keep their rent levels low. So, I'm always a big advocate for that. But Alan, I do like your analysis of those, that buy, build, and finance really are all part of the same goal in a way. It's just we're either targeting new units or we're targeting refurbishing older units, and then I guess you could talk about the education and rental retaliation. Yeah, the third pillar. Yeah.
Mhm.
I do like that.
Oh, Ben, unmute.
So I was just gonna say there's kind of an A and a B on the new units that we saw from the regional presentation. As one is just increasing the number of available units. 2 was kind of a sub focus on home ownership, right? Which we know, we know most new units are not going to be home ownership right initially, but to create some home ownership there as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, boy, I don't know. I keep thinking about the land trust, and it's a different ownership, a way to build some equity, not, you know, entire equity, but
I agree. It gets your foot in the door. You need a
Yeah.
way to get into the cycle of ownership. Well, even understanding, the thing with the ownership, home ownership, the dollar gap per unit is so large. I mean, it's very large for rentals, and it's even larger for ownership. So understanding where our dollars go that way, does it go for rental? Does it go for ownership? Does it go for refurbishment? How do we allocate our money that way? Maybe we don't have to, maybe we don't have to set specific goals for that, but it seems like, I don't know, to be effective, I think having some more specific targets would be good.
yeah.
Right. And perhaps with some flexibility, right? Perhaps, if we find a great opportunity, a great project comes along, right, in one of those spaces that, we hadn't anticipated it getting a lot more bang for the buck. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Agreed.
How much do we think that what we set as far as these priorities and recommendations we make as far as expanding the CDA, how much do we think is it, do we want to try and make as big an impact as possible, or do we want to uh, lay the groundwork for the next TIF, the next, so that we can kind of create the path and the process and wait for the next influx of funding to really accomplish maybe what we want to as far as a metric might go?
Yeah, I think what you're recommending, Alan, like beefing up the CDA, and I think the main thing is that, Madison, I think, which one? Maybe it was Oregon, they had, that affordable housing fund set up, right? And that
Yeah.
was like their CDA kind of was able to pull from those funds. And they could do the buy, build, finance through that.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing with Madison is that, basically every time a TID closes, the money just gets added back into that fund. So it kind of is like replenished, and it kind of continues on throughout, as long as they can, keep closing TIDs and putting money into there. So I think Middleton is in an interesting situation right now, I think, because our first influx of money will be, millions of dollars estimated. So it is quite large, whereas I think it was like, Wanakee had, like 100K or something total. So, it will be a larger pot of money. And so, I think establishing that framework first is definitely very important, but I think we'll have enough funds in order to, kind of, work it out and, create, maybe an affordable housing fund.
Really good point though, Al, in terms of maybe there's part of a mix, maybe some things we can get after right away. Like Daphne said, it's a significant amount of money, things we can go after right away, but maybe there's also, like you said, whether, I don't know if it's the right term, but kind of like creating that sort of endowment that helps kind of, scale it as it goes down the road.
I think that would be probably my number one pick here of creating that infrastructure to manage future influxes. That even if we don't make a ton of progress in terms of units or projects there, I think having that infrastructure is a first step to sustainably continuing the work. And it certainly appeared that way from, Madison's kind of presentation on the history of theirs, that it certainly felt like a snowball, but it had to start. So we're rolling the first bit of the snowball, maybe.
Alan, doesn't it seem like we could start some of the movement on the infrastructure now, even before we get this influx of money.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So I think you're right. It makes a lot of sense to me. Like, let's make sure we've got our plan in place and you know, whatever municipal organizations or committees or, you know,
Staff.
agencies are necessary. Let's get those in place and ready to go. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So maybe something that I can work on for maybe in the next meeting or next couple meetings is getting maybe a joint workforce housing CDA kind of joint meeting, just to see, you know, is CDA interested in taking on this whole new role kind of thing? I know, you know, some people have expressed interest, but is, you know, the entire committee interested in something like that, you know? If we were to establish, you know, a affordable housing fund, you know, who would really be able to take ownership of it? Would it be like a joint workforce housing and CDA kind of thing, or would it just be CDA, you know? So, yeah, that's something that I can work on in the next couple of months and see where we go from there.
That's
Be awesome,
a good idea, Daphne. What's the council's role in that? Is the CDA totally independent of council?
No, I believe the mayor and maybe one or two alders are on the board or in the committee. And then it's definitely like there's some like business owners on there as well. And I know it is, you know, currently very downtown focused. And so, you know, we might have to shuffle around some more members if we want it to be, you know, a citywide kind of, you know, committee.
What would I mean, if the CDA says, you know, we like our focus where we're at and we don't really want to expand and our goals aren't aligned with workforce housing's goals, what are our alternatives?
I mean, if establishing that affordable housing fund is kind of, you know, our main priority for, you know, this TIF extension, I think that would probably be, you know, I don't know if it would be establishing a new committee or maybe reworking this committee into, you know, some kind of thing that can, you know, manage those kinds of funds or, you know, be able to look at projects like that. So it might be that, or, you know, I think our council is a little avoidant of creating a whole new committee, but, you know, having some kind of, you know, linking workforce housing with that fund.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Why would a new committee even be a consideration if we already have this one? And yeah, because we're not structured or, you know, to be able to manage a fund like that at this point, right? But the new committee would need to be structured for that too, right?
The current CDA's scope is really limited to like, Daphne one time used it like flowers downtown is kind of like the focus. And this would be a really big increase of their scope of responsibility.
Yeah.
And that downtown focus has a place, and maybe that's a subgroup, but I think this other thing is different enough that if they said, yeah, we're not interested, then somebody else.
Right. I guess, yeah, it's a good point. I guess my question was, why would that somebody else not just be this committee, right?
Right.
Why would that be the first option? Again, I understand I don't understand, you know, ramifications of having to rework the roles and the setup for us, but
yeah. I think either way, it's going to be probably a major restructure of how either committee operates. So yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so Daphne will kind of work on us meeting with the CDA group to figure out, kind of pitch to them the idea and see what they think and kind of go from there. I think, well, I don't know, any other points, topics, questions, ideas?
The only other thing that that kind of came up in the discussion, they talked about Kurt Paulson's analysis of their, of some of the counties' metrics, the 250 units per year, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if we could ask Kurt kind of what, if he were to suggest some metrics for us, if he has, some guidelines for us that might help us.
That
don't
was
know if you
why
do.
I was kind of curious about because they have metrics on I'm looking at a printout of the executive plan, which you haven't read it. It's really nice because they have that page that kind of overviews all the priorities and strategies, and then
Yeah.
each priority has those action steps with it. At the bottom of each
Yep.
one, there's the metrics there. So I was thinking, boy, if they have access to these metrics for Dane County, that's where we could pull some of this from. But it sounds like it's never that easy when you're reporting on something. But I think if we can start there and then talk to Kurt and be like, what's the Middleton specific target?
Yeah, what's Middleton's share of this?
Yeah,
that's kind of what I was thinking too.
Yeah. I also like the structure of this is because we could add like a fourth column to the side and kind of score Middleton on how are we doing for each one of these action steps. And Randy, to your point, for like 1.2, what's our Middleton goal here?
Yeah, right. What is that? Yeah. What are we, what should our allocation be? If we're doing our share of the heavy lifting, what is our share?
Yeah, that is interesting because at least when I was in my master's program in LA, they have, a whole like regional like council of government, and that council of government allocates certain numbers of affordable housing to each community. And it was from my understanding that the communities did not appreciate something like that, an allocation, especially since many of them, couldn't keep up with hitting those kinds of targets. So that was at least from my experience in California, but it's interesting to see here, we're really interested in knowing what our allocation is.
Well, I was just kind of circling back to this idea of having some specific targets to shoot for.
Yeah.
Right. California might actually got closer to the target by doing that, even though nobody liked it.
That's true. Yeah.
Anything else before we move to the next agenda item? Okay, next one was staff updates.
Yeah, sure. So I just have some general updates. I've been working a lot with some members of Badger State Housing Alliance. They have this like monthly kind of thing called Curds of Wisdom, where they bring in an expert in some field, and they talk about whatever is housing related in that. So I was actually just on one, and so we were talking about zoning and all of that, and Middleton, we updated our zoning, so what we're anticipating. So there's that, and then Badger State Housing Alliance and More Housing Wisconsin. Those are two groups, I think more at the state level, that are, advocacy and trying to support municipalities on how to build more housing. And so they have some really great, kind of webinars or like lunch and learn kind of things. They're all around, 45 minutes to an hour. So, if you're free, during lunch, they have some really good ones. Kurt Paulson was on another one. The zoning administrator for Madison, she did one. Katie Bannon, I think was her name. She did one that was really interesting on like lot sizes and stuff like that. And then this week, actually on Wednesday and Thursday, there's a conference called A Home for Everyone. And it's actually here in Middleton at the Marriott West. And so if you have time, you're welcome to stop by. and sit into some of those presentations. I think I will be able to make it to maybe one. But yeah, it's called A Home for Everyone. So if you just look it up online, if you're free or you're really interested in 1 or 2 sessions, I highly encourage you guys to go and see some of that. So I was just introduced to all of these groups a couple of weeks ago, but it's good to hear that there's a bunch of different groups that are all working on the same thing. So that's my update.
I'm glad to see that you're kind of interested, reaching out and finding out about these other organizations and so forth. And I think that's great. Thanks, Daphne.
Yeah, no problem.
Future agenda items. I know the one that we have is probably not the next one, but discussion with the CDA group. Any other topics for probably our next meeting?
Daphne, is it worthwhile just to kind of update us on what some targets might be? Is that a reasonable thing that we could look towards at a future meeting?
Yeah, I can definitely look into, some of the data we've been, going over and seeing if we can, prepare some targets. I'll probably discuss with Professor Paulson before, and I can see if I can get you guys some, ballpark estimates of what we should be kind of going towards.
And going back to Randy's point about the goals, if we could bring back in the existing ones, and maybe, I don't know if Daphne have a quick view of what it took to do that assessment, right? If we're thinking about that being one of the priority things we would do, what redoing that assessment entails.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a next step from the condo resolution we did last time, or is there?
I think it's being circulated for signatures by the mayor and I think a couple of alder members. And then I believe our clerk will be sending it out to, that long list of, committees and senators and representatives at the end. So that should be happening in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Great.
Right. No other motion or anything else for future agenda items? Otherwise, you'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Randy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ben. There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
It is 6:34 and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alan. Nice job.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice job, Alan. Thanks for running the meeting.
Bye.
Great. Bye.